Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Content Alchemy. We have a really special episode for you today and a really special guest as well, with a conversation that centers around the theme of risk. So, our guest of today is Paul Kidd. Paul is currently the Executive Creative Director at WorldStrides, where he is charged with elevating creativity and enterprising brand, all while evolving the internal studio process, culture, talent, etc. He is an award-winning creative do-gooder, and he describes himself as possessing a passion for creativity and innovation while establishing rich connections with those around him. He's an experienced creative leader and focuses on delivering creative that derives revenue, awareness, and engagement for global enterprises, agencies, and their clients. Past employers and clients range from worldwide B2C, CPG, and B2B technology brands, as well as small business, real estate, medical, municipalities, nonprofits, etc. As a proven leader, he's known as an energetic collaborator with vast knowledge of creative principles, technologies, management, and communication skills. And he believes that the key to success is understanding the client need, then applying research, strategy, and creative innovation to, quote, make it happen. Paul has been fortunate enough to have built and directed many multidisciplinary creative departments over the years. And he believes in positive coaching and servant leadership to develop strong creative organizations that support one another, celebrating success together. And we're going to talk a little bit about celebrating success together as we chat about the risk-taking and collaborative energy among internal and external teams. So let's just hop right into this, and I encourage you to join in our conversation with Paul Kidd. Awesome. All right, Paul, it's so good to see you. It's so good to have you. I feel like it's been a while since we chatted, so it's nice to see you in your office with your Vincent van Gogh, the postman, painting behind you. I'm really excited. I always look forward to seeing it.
Is that different, Paul, or is that how it was before?
That's how it was
looks
before.
A little different. Okay, all right. It looks great still.
It's always such a satisfying background to me. I'm always so excited anytime we're on a call. It's like, oh, it's so beautiful and so laid out. There's so much thought behind it. It's so nice.
The problem is it's all behind me. I don't get to enjoy it the way that most of you do.
We need to do more of this. Just hop on more calls. We'll record a bunch of podcast episodes. That way everyone can see it. You can see yourself. It's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Paul, we're so excited that you're able to join us today. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of big questions, and we have a really big theme today, which I think is cool. And that theme is risk. So I think there's a lot for us to dive into. But Matt, I'm going to let you take it away.
Yeah. I guess, a big part of me, I love working with companies that have a little bit larger teams, but I will 100% say that they are a bit more complex to work with. So I guess to kind of kick us off here, I'm wondering if you can sort of like talk about, I don't know, how you go about navigating and reducing the risk, I guess, as much as possible. Like, how do you navigate doing creative work with a team when there are so many people sort of involved and they all have different goals in mind?
Right. I think I learned early on that collaboration is key. I think really setting up an opportunity to let people talk about what those goals are, understanding different points of view, and outcomes that people are looking for is just so very important. To your point, like, you get people in the room and you start to hear a lot of different narratives of outcomes of maybe what everybody aligns on as far as the ask goes, but what they want out of it. And I think, on the backside of that, once you have everybody in the room, one of the things that I really like to rail on is just this idea that the creative studio, every participant within the studio really has to own the word why. You have a rare opportunity when you get those stakeholders in rooms, particularly in a large organization, to really pick the brains, to be curiosity driven, to make sure you have the information that allows you to be equipped to solve the problems for your partners, right? To shape the solutions alongside everybody. And I think also, on the other side of that, on the end, it helps you to justify the outcome too, right? Because I think during that journey, people can lose sight and kind of wander off trail a little bit. And so it's, if you're armed with all that information, it allows you at the very end to sort of say, no, remember, this is what we talked about. This was the goal. And this is how we're achieving it. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of my big thing. Collaboration, own the why.
I love that, because one of the things, like for me, especially as a producer, is like we talk a lot about, like, obviously organization. And so to have that really early on organization of thought and ideas and opinions is so helpful, because when you get down the line and, we get so bogged down in the details, we get into the production of, oh, is this working? Do we like this style? Is that working? Do we need to tweak, this animated bit? Like, there's so many different little detailed pieces once you get further into it. But really being able to maintain that big picture, that why, the big W, right? Of why are we here? What are we doing? I love that really, really early on establishment. So I'd love to hear you kind of talk a little bit about that, of what do those early meetings look like, or what should they look like, getting all those people together? What questions should people be asking?
It's really sort of an interesting dynamic, if I could talk a little bit about sort of like agency versus studio, in-house studio, right? One thing that I always marvel at, and I've led both, is when a client signs up with an agency, they seem to be very willing to do the upfront work. We're going to do the strategy. We're going to understand the personas. We're going to come in with all the KPIs we want to hit. At the onset of this project, here's what defines success. Really buttoned up. And maybe it's because they're writing a check for 6 figures, or more for this campaign or whatever it might be. But I think one of the challenges for the in-house studios is that lack of information that these groups might have for the agencies. It's there, and I don't know why necessarily that's not readily available, or why they don't come into the room with that. But coming back to your question, I think that's really a big part of it, right? My demand is that we need to have all those insights. We need to have all that information. What is the strategy? What is the performance data that you've had historically? Who are our personas? Who is our audience? What makes them tick? How can we separate you as, the person that's, hopefully signing off and really enjoying this work we're developing, but understanding it's really about the audience, not about you. And so all of these insights, all of the information, all those data points that you're targeting for your metrics once you launch, you need to have that out in front of you to be successful. I mean, that's how you solve the problem, right? I mean, in the end, creative, in my opinion, we're solving problems creatively in a way that's engaging and fun, and memorable. But, you can't do it without a good set of information out in front of you.
Right. I guess that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to get you on the show, because I mean, honestly, like, really admired just kind of your approach on your team of just kind of like, there's a couple things that I noticed here, right? One was, even when things maybe weren't as like organized in the moment, it felt like it didn't feel super stressful. Like, it felt like there was always a way out, right? It felt like, oh, okay, we just need to like think about this a little bit more. There was never like any panic, I guess, is kind of the word.
Right.
And I guess I'm kind of wondering like how you learned not to just like panic when you don't always have like the answers. And maybe that's too big of a question, but curious where you go.
I mean, I probably learned the hard way, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, I think, earlier in my career, I would have fretted, I would have lost sleep, I would have, just wrung myself ragged to try to make sure I could stay in front of a project that was going sideways, like just force of will, get it back on track. But I think I've learned over time just to be a little bit more pragmatic about it. And I want to be careful that pragmatic doesn't mean don't care or don't have passion. It's quite the opposite, actually. It's sort of recognizing that, we will get to the right solution. We will launch on time. Everything's going to be fine. I think that, as a leader, people are feeding off of your energy. So, like if they see panic in your eyes, oh my goodness, like chaos can ensue pretty quickly. But I think being calm-minded, and just sort of recognizing that, we have a lot of smart people in the room. We all know how to solve problems. We've all probably faced these similar situations many times throughout our careers or customer and client journeys. And so it's just tapping back into that energy, and recognizing that if you can be a little bit more pragmatic, calm, the path will reveal itself, and you'll get yourself through it just fine. I think the stress, layering in that stress usually leads to more chaos, honestly. And sometimes too, it's just a matter of just saying, let's just put the pencils down for a minute. Let's just come back to this tomorrow. Everybody take 5, let's clear the head. We're going to combat it tomorrow. And with people sleeping on it, it's amazing what happens when you get back into the work. Like I said, often it's the clarity that you need.
Right. I guess following up on that a little bit, I very much feel like I'm cut from the same cloth a little bit, where it's like, it's not about just kind of the panic. It's always like, okay, like now, like things are not going like how we planned. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing about creative work and just marketing in general, right? It's like the whole everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face kind of thing, right?
Right.
And like I feel like every campaign that we've ever done has always been that way, where it's like the best you can do is kind of plan as much as you can up front. And like you were saying, like I love the whole, like if everybody knows what the why is for things, there's always this thing to kind of come back to, like this safe place basically, where you could always run back to if we need to.
Right.
And I don't know, like, so it's always refreshing to see other people like do that same thing, where it's like, oh no, like we're just at that point, and like you have to like go back to the safe place for a moment and like regroup a little bit and make sure you're reminding everybody like, hey, here's why we're doing this stuff. And with that goal of still like, I mean, for us anyway, it's always like we want to make great stuff no matter what. And I'm sure you feel the same way, right?
Right.
And it's like, when you learn new things throughout a project, like it can be really tough, but I don't know. There's no question here. It's more of a compliment, right? It's that like it's really refreshing and nice to be able to see how other people can work in a really similar way. And it's like not everything needs to be freak out and like everything's the sky's falling, right? Sometimes it's just go back to the safe place.
Right. Well, and you said something that spawned a notion, and it's about checking the boxes, right? And I think sometimes it's just a reminder that we're on the right track. I think we can second guess ourselves a lot. And often it happens with our stakeholders, right? The clients or the stakeholders might give some ambiguous answer about, well, this isn't what I was thinking I was going to see. And again, that sort of gets you into that, kind of challenging headspace. But we can ground ourselves by, asking some basic questions. And this is what I want to always ask, for the work that we're producing before it gets in front of the stakeholder. But it's, like, what's the idea? Is it clear? Is there a core idea in all of this? Are we just making something cool? Did we just take some random pieces and move them around a page until it felt like we had a good layout? Because that never survives, right? So like, what's the great idea? And then is it distinctive? Does it have space to breathe in within your audience and in that sector of business that you're operating? Is it beautiful? Is it well crafted? Is the message and the visual all there? Is it moving? Is it motivating? Is it memorable? And so I think that also helps when you say about, like getting grounded and coming back to, what's safe. What's safe is the answer to those questions. Yes, we checked those boxes. Yes, it stands up to all of this. And I think that's usually what sort of clears the smoke a little bit, to your point about like, the punch or the battlefield, and it's just reminding everybody, yes, no, this checks the boxes. Here's why. Here's the validation to justify this, these concepts that we're sharing with you right now.
Yeah, that's something that I think about a lot, is like that role of the leader, to be able to stay calm and to be able to like ask those right questions and to continue like, okay, well, I mean, I recognize that there is an issue, but I'm not alone, right? Like it's
Right.
not just me. I have a team. I'm collaborating with these other people, and like I consider myself a generally somewhat anxious person, but not usually about the work, because I know that it's important to trust the process, right? Panic isn't
Yeah.
helpful. Panic isn't helpful to get to the end result. So when you know that you can ask those questions and you can lean on your collaborators and you can bring ideas back and say, okay, maybe this isn't working. How do we fix things? How do we find a solution? It needs to be solution driven, not panic driven. And so much of that comes into trust, which kind of brings up another idea that we were talking about beforehand going into this, is how do you know when it is time to bring in another trusted collaborator into the process, who may be able to kind of like mediate that, who may be able to step into a problem that's there, help find a solution, and whether that be somebody who is an internal collaborator or an external collaborator? How do you know when it's
Yeah.
time to bring them into the process?
Man, that is a really good question. Is it the spidey senses? Is that the answer I have to give?
Right. That's it.
I mean, it sort of depends on the audience, right? It depends on your stakeholder, your client. In my opinion, it's about reading the room and sort of recognizing when are you so far off that, yeah, you need that other voice to come in, and maybe they don't agree with me. Maybe they have to remind me that that actually this other person has a good point of view. Um, I think I hope I'm not getting off topic here, but I think that's a huge skill as you like develop your career like in the creative space, right? And you get into management or senior management, you're leading studios and teams. Is this idea of almost like account management, right? It's about relationships and relationship building. It's about just having conversations with your stakeholders, not necessarily because there's a project, but just to get to know them and them get to know you. And so you start to see those signs when maybe something is not aligned, and you can spot that a little earlier on. You can sort of mitigate that and bring the tension down, or help someone to see the point of view, or to your point, bring in that third party, bring another person into the room that we both value their opinions, and so let's just ask them, what do you think, in a way that doesn't feel confrontational. But I think a lot of it is just building trust with your stakeholders, honestly. And I don't think trust is ever given; it's always earned. Um, and sometimes trust can be earned by challenging an opinion, in a respectful way. I think also that's the other thing. I think a lot of people misalign trust as saying yes to everything, and that quickly gets you nowhere. Talking about anxiety. So anyhow, I feel like that's a wandering answer, Shelby. I'm sorry, but I think it is about, you'll sort of know it when you see it, and hopefully you have that relationship to spot those signs of like, oh boy, we're starting to hit these loggerheads where we need to have someone come in and help sort of navigate this conversation with us.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing you said, because I guess what I often see with teams is that I don't know, whenever they sort of, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before with like the safe place, right? And sometimes it becomes almost a little bit too safe. And it's like, okay, well, now everything we're doing almost becomes ineffective sometimes. Now, I say this based on the experience that a lot of times when people like reach out to us, they're like, we need to do something different. Like we need something different. Like
Yeah.
I'd say 8 out of 10 times, which if you're doing fractions, that's not right. But I could reduce that, but I'm not going to. We hear something like that, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the value that people often get from like working with an outside company. So I'm curious, like, how does an internal team like have those sort of checks and balances of like, hey, are we in a rut? Are we just doing the same things we always do? Or like when is it time to like break out of it
Yeah.
and do something crazy?
The thing that I love about the evolution of in-house teams. So, throughout my career, started agencies, went in-house, went back to agencies, went back in-house. So I've done the hopscotch. And more and more often, we're seeing these in-house organizations bring in that agency energy and push that resolve to sort of challenge the convention. In-house teams don't have to be production teams. And it used to be, back in the day that, it was almost uninspiring to say you were an in-house, right, leader or on an in-house team. And it's just not so anymore. And so I think to answer your question, it's about holding ourselves accountable. It's about always pushing for that stretch idea. It's about saying, you know what, I know you just are looking for this, uh, but we see a bigger opportunity here. How would you feel about that if we went and, shot for the moon here? And, I rarely come across a scenario in which a stakeholder would say, no, I'm not interested. It like you pique their interest and they're sort of curious and they want to see what you can do. Um, but it's about bringing that energy. You can't call yourself a creative studio and not live up to that. Like to me, it's a promise to the stakeholders internally that we can deliver those big ideas. We will deliver the big ideas. And so the stretch work and the stretch work is the fun work. And I don't think it's any different than probably what you deal with clients is, there's sort of okay, here's more of the same. Here's moving the needle, 60% down the line. And then here's the big shot. And sometimes they'll take the big shot or sometimes they'll take that one that's 60%. But they wouldn't even take the 60% down the line if they didn't see the big idea that like pulls them forward into this sort of more creative thinking. But that's what I like. This is what I challenge my staff with, right? And hold myself accountable to internally is like demanding that we push those envelopes and deliver great creative stretch work to our stakeholders.
Yeah, I love that idea too of in-house teams having more power than I think what we give them credit for in general in the
Yeah,
creative world. Because I know, like as an external team, I love working with really like passionate internal teams, with internal teams that really, really get the brand and want to make
yeah,
things that are cool and want to push the boundaries. Like that's so inspiring for us as an external team because we know that they care, right? We can care because we know that they care. And we work
right.
with a lot of clients that are like that, really, really just want to make interesting, entertaining, story-driven work because they care so much about their brand. And that
Yeah,
pushes us too. And I do have, that safe space and breaking out of the safe space of being able to retreat into it when needed, but also breaking out of it when you really need to push and make effective and risky. We're going back to that theme of risk, taking those
hmm,
risks to make really, really effective content marketing. I I you've mentioned a little bit kind of like before this in some of the things that we had chatted about you had referred to it as the speed to market versus the test and learn mentality, um,
yeah.
which I'd love for you to define those terms a little bit further, but also how do you feel, or how do you measure the effectiveness of those two methods of content strategy?
Yeah, this feels really relevant. I don't, I think anywhere I've ever been, this is like a challenge that we grapple with, right? And that constantly, thanks to technology and audience, attention span and what have you, it's like just trying to go faster and faster and faster and get things out in front of the audience as quickly as we can. And, my thought around test and learn is that with that methodology, there's usually, hopefully, really good data dashboards, and everybody's sort of watching, in real time, almost like mission control, right? And we're pumping that out there, but we knew ahead of time, okay, we're going to throw these things out there. We're going to try like, 4 different, headline visual combinations in these paid ads. And, we're going to track this and report back at the end of every day, see what's going on, pivot, move. But that's the whole plan going into it, right? It's just, you're going to be in for a ride. You're going to learn a lot of great things, but the data tracking is there. The keeping an eye laser focused on the metrics is right there front and center, versus speed to market, which often is just, we're nervous that we're missing a chance. We don't know what the chance is, but we just feel like we're missing something. So let's just like fire and forget, just get something out there. And I just feel like it does more damage to your brand than good. Like, take the extra week, take the extra 2 weeks, whatever it is, to make sure that what you're putting out there as quality actually does serve a purpose. Because I think sometimes it's just, you're just checking the box. Well, we just want to send another email. Well, why? Because, we think that might help. Help what? Help how? Like, what's the problem you're trying to solve here? Are we sure that the extra email is actually what's going to solve your problem? Or are we just doing busy work that just, we can report to others and say, hey, like, we did the thing. Like, that's nice. Did you have any clicks? No. Well, yeah, but we did it. It doesn't count.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's probably I don't know, one of the biggest things that I probably see with more of the corporate style companies is that you do see a lot of just that busy work.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's like you kind of crying wolf in a way, where it's like, you have your audience that you're trying to reach. And when you start to just make too much stuff, almost like just too much, like kind of random stuff, you're losing attention. Even when you do make this thing that's like, has a little bit higher quality or a bigger purpose. It's just, well, because you did all that other stuff, you actually spent more money to lose some attention over time.
Right.
And I don't know, it's a tough thing to do, because that's what teams do, right? Like, I'm put here to make stuff, so I'm gonna just keep making stuff, right? Right. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting to think about that stuff.
Yeah. And I think you can go fast, but I think there's an opportunity to be planful at the same time, whether that's robust calendars and you're mapping this out months in advance, or the next quarter or the next year. And so, it doesn't mean that you need 3 months to take the deliverable and, do the work, but knowing that there's a plan, a calendar, a cadence, whatever it is, with a set goal, for a purpose for that deliverable, then I think, you can go fast and you can be effective. But it's funny because you're doing it in a way that's very planful all at the same time. And so I that's the thing that just sort of gets to me. But like I said, I think it's sort of speed to market can be, you got to be careful, in my opinion. Test and learn, love it. I love test and learn. I think everybody on my staff and places I've been, even at agencies, we really enjoy that, because you're learning in the moment. And you're sort of, again, that curiosity, you're tapping into it. Like, well, what if we do this? What if we change that photo? What if we modulate that headline and lean a little bit more towards this language versus that language? And I don't know. I find that fascinating. I mean, I think creatives in general are very curious people. I think we generally can never get enough data to fill our heads, to take something out there or see the reactions of the work. Which I think also, interestingly enough, Shelby, when you talk about risk, I think that's a big part of risk as well, is a lot of times, and I don't think it's, whether your agency or otherwise, I don't think it matters, getting those performance metrics post-campaign. I think companies can do a much better job providing those, post-campaigns, post-launch analytics that help us to be better the next time around. Let us take those learnings. We just sort of throw it out there, and maybe sometimes you hear it went well, or sometimes you maybe hear it didn't. But I think there's this sort of like, you got to close the loop on it all. You can set us up for success with a lot of great info at the beginning. We can use all those assumptions to develop an amazing campaign. and still maybe it doesn't hit the way you want it to. Well, I want to know about that. I want to know why. I want to interrogate that performance, good, bad, or otherwise, so I can replicate or avoid, a miss.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that, like constantly asking the question why. And I like that you keep kind of wrapping back to that, Paul, because that's always a thing that, I think we get stuck in like, okay, well we made the thing. Cool. What's the next thing that we're going to make? It's like we're missing that reflective period of, okay, well why did we make this thing? Why did it perform the way that it did? And what are we going to take from that experience and bring into the next piece that we're making, into the next content? What is it that
Yeah.
we really learned from this experience? And how do we move forward with that? It's so good to ask all of those questions. I mean, there should be question marks all over the place because, that's
Mm-hmm.
how we grow. That's how we develop.
Absolutely. And one of the things we talked about the in-house when we were talking about the in-house moment, and my desire that we push ourselves, we drive that creativity. But I also love the collaborations with external parties like yourselves, because you're asking us the questions and it's forcing us to take a good hard look at all the things that we thought we knew, and then we're having to sort of parrot it back, right? And I think in doing that and having other people sort of question you and sort of what you think is the truth around your brand or your audience brings up a whole lot of other, like, potentially new insights. And so that, again, you talk about mitigating risk or collaborations, and, we can focus on the stakeholders, but even just among creatives between two different creative organizations, I think, you can have some really, interesting outcomes through that sort of the why and the data metrics, and, and sort of really understanding the nuts and bolts of what was going to drive success. But even when I talk to you all and you ask me great questions, I'm like, you know what? I didn't think about that. Hold on a second. Let me get back to you. Those are just, I don't know. It's such a small thing to ask the question. And I think a lot of people, like, they hold back. They either are worried that, like imposter syndrome, or they don't want someone to think that they don't know what they're doing, or, insecure, whatever it might be. But I feel like, when it comes to asking those questions, it should be like that 5-year-old that's just like rabbit punching you with, like, why is the sky blue? Why does the wind blow? Why is there hair on my arms? like all the things. You should just feel exhausted. A stakeholder should feel exhausted when they're done with a call with any of us if we call ourselves creative. Right? I mean, I don't know. That's just something that I'm always thinking about.
Yeah, I think it's great. All right, we have one last question for you.
Yeah.
It's probably gonna be the most difficult of them all. In your experience, what has been your favorite project that you've ever worked on, and why?
You're supposed to prep me on this one.
No, I didn't prep you at all.
Oh man, there's a lot to choose from. NASCAR. Okay, so I am not a gearhead. I'm going to say this right out of the gate. I'm not a gearhead. But I am opportunistic, and I was working for a company. It was Redbox, and the CEO decided they were going to lean heavy into sports sponsorships. And so we spent 2 years with sponsorships with the MLB, NFL, Major League Baseball, like soccer, you name it. And we got into NASCAR. And they're like, hey, Paul, the team we're going to sponsor, they have their own creatives. We could leverage their resources if you want. I'm like, oh, heck no. Like, I want in on this. This is something that's nothing like nothing I've done before. I want in on it. And those 2 years were so fun. It was really amazing. Just leaning in on trackside activations and just seeing how the fan base is. I would love to get into F1 now that I've had a taste with NASCAR. And it was an interesting moment, a lot of unique sort of campaign and advertising experiences that I haven't enjoyed in my career up to that point. But the people were amazing. The work was super fun and creative. The photo shoots we were doing, the videos we were spinning out, trackside activations, like I said, all of it. It was really fantastic, and probably something I'll never dive into again. So, that was probably one of my more memorable experience with work.
I love that. Yeah, that actually sounds super duper fun. I have a lot of family members that are huge NASCAR fans, so it's the Midwest, right?
I had no idea what to expect. I'm out here in Seattle, I just it was really something, and fun. I mean, everybody was just really enjoying the journey. So yeah, I can't complain. That was definitely a really, really memorable moment. Yeah.
Awesome. We really appreciated you being on the show today, Paul. I think we had a really good
Yeah, thanks,
discussion. I
Paul.
liked everything that we kind of went through today. I think we hit a lot of really great points.
Yeah.
Matt, you took yourself off mute.
Yeah, I did. I was just saying, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it as well. I always like to have a podium. So, but yeah, no,
Sorry.
it was a great time. Appreciate it, and thanks for the invitation. And I'll be talking with you more in the future, I'm sure.
For sure.
Awesome.
All right, everyone's
Pretty clearly, we haven't worked out our ways to end these interviews just yet.
I am currently segueing us over into our final thoughts. So I will see you over at final thoughts in just a moment.
I really love that conversation with Paul. We've been working together with Paul for the last few months now, and I don't know, it is really refreshing just working with some people that have just like a calm way of working through stuff, and maybe it's just trust. I mean, we talk about this idea of risk, and it's like any risk is hard to take on, whether that's an internal project or hiring an outside vendor. Like, I don't know, like almost everything that you do when you're in that position, you're almost like kind of putting your own job on the line, right? And for some people, they understand, they get it, they're comfortable with it, and then some people that we have worked with in the past, like, it's just a very uncomfortable position to be in. And I mean, it kind of makes sense when you think about kind of what's on the line. But I like the idea that it's, I don't know, you just can't look at it that way necessarily. You have to just put the best plan together and execute.
It is that thing of like there's good and bad risk, right? And good risk means that you're pushing boundaries, you're doing something that no one else has done before in the best way possible. And there's the bad part of that risk of what is the time and money that's being cost because of it. And it is something of, obviously there's a cost to all this. I mean, anybody who works in marketing is aware of that. And sometimes it is hard to be able to tell, what were the results of this content? What did we get out of it? Because sometimes it's not really a quantifiable, measurable results. And that does kind of come into, what Paul was talking about, of making sure that you're testing those things and analyzing the data afterwards and analyzing the results even beyond the data. Being able to have that bravery to kind of go off into that uncharted land of digital content marketing and not exactly always know what's going to work the best, but still going forward and learning and asking those questions to learn more and develop and study further. I think that's really something that we can learn from Paul and from that conversation, is to always be a constant student, to always be asking questions, both of the content that you're creating itself, of your stakeholders, of the studios that you're working with. Ask questions and learn as much as you can, because that will help you take less bad risk and more of the good risks, right? It puts you more in a position of, because you've had that study, because you've had that experience, to push the envelope more and really learn from those experiences in the best ways possible.
Right. I had a call a while back, and this is kind of it's a common call that we get around this time of year where people say that they want to do something holiday related. And we've done some just really weird corporate-y stuff in the past where it's like, okay, let's just make our logo dance, or like just this really fluffy stuff that it's like, okay, like that is something, but does it really move the needle? And so I had this conversation a few weeks back, and I kind of let my frustrations get to me a little bit here because they said like, hey, we want to do something holiday related. And I'm like, all right, listen, like before we get into this, we could make your logo and put some snow falling around it if that's what you're looking for. But nobody's interested in that. Like nobody cares. That's not going to make a difference. It's going to end up basically being a waste of money for you. Instead, like you have a, a part of a great idea here. And all I basically did was like, all right, if I did this in the way that like I think it should be done, like there needs to be something more to this. We should use this as an opportunity to tell us some sort of story. And that's when they're like, well, we actually have a lot of new brand elements. I'm like, perfect. Now it's a way to introduce some of the new brand while also telling a story at the same time. And that was kind of like one of those really great moments of being on a call, and they don't know exactly what they want, but they had a goal in mind, right? They're like, we know that we want to just kind of get people's attention and wow them a little bit. And it's like, great. Now, if I have that goal in mind, then us as a, third party company or second party, I don't know how it works. Us as an external company get to come in and start asking some of these questions that, and not to say that they've like not thought about this stuff, but they probably haven't thought about it in the exact way that I'm going to ask or that a lot of other companies might ask. And it's funny because I mean, same thing with Paul and what he was saying, like when we worked together, it was like we would ask questions that we would consider to be somewhat simple, but you can always tell by the silence on the other end. It's like, oh, that's the big question. Like we haven't noticed that. Like we've been so, I don't know, consumed by all the other things that we struggle to see that. And I don't know, it's just a really fascinating thing. And that's like, again, one of the reasons that I love having those conversations with those kinds of teams that do have like this internal creative structure is that it allows us to, kind of like you were saying during the interview, where it's like we're kind of able to feed off of that a bit and be able to use that and be more creative with the decisions that we're making.
Yeah, that collaboration process is so important, and it's something really to be valued. It's something that you can take with you even beyond just that creative process, beyond the content process, like just further developing yourself as a human being it's really, really worthwhile. And especially if you're working, us as an external team working with really, really passionate internal teams that care about what they're creating, that's so rewarding for us. And it's something that we learn all the time from those teams of what really do they value, what makes them tick, what are they analyzing afterwards. I mean, there's the big difference. I mean, we have so many clients work in so many different ways, and their internal teams work in different ways. And it comes back to finding what works for you as a team, but it also is learning from other people, because we learn from internal creative teams all the time, and it helps us too. And that collaborative process it really is. I mean, it's priceless education, right? Of further developing your teamwork and your leadership abilities.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Love it. We love it.
I love
Anyway,
it.
that is our show. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And we'll have another great guest on next week. But until then, stay magical. Content Alchemy is presented by Made by Things. To learn more about us, check out madebythings.com. And if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, send us a message at alchemy@madebythings.com.